we have to be quote unquote more white. And I didn't understand what that meant, but that meant just moving into more, less urban neighborhoods, things like that. Like, so only speak English, only eat American food. But what does that, I didn't know what that meant. And it wasn't until, later on in my 20s where I realized, I'm proud of my heritage, proud of who I am, but I should have always been proud of who I was from the day that I was brought into this world. So for me, it's more than just a year. And then, Greg, when you mentioned, the 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 online social media like forums where people say, well, we've been going through this for a year. No, I think it's been a lot longer, but I think it's just more recently that it's become more openly spoken about or openly talked about. So for me, it's hard to talk about this. And again, and I'm sorry that I'm getting emotional, but it's just, it's an everyday thing now. It's always been, but I think we were able to kind of suppress it. But now it's
And
just overwhelming, to say the
I
least.
I thank you for sharing that, and that definitely um, helps our discussion. And the point that I'm trying to make to even people of color, and this is an important point, we ourselves are not immune to racism. And that's what I want to like what I found disturbing, extremely disturbing, is you can go on social media and you can see many examples of African Americans committing violence against Asian Americans. We should be the last people on earth who want to,
Right.
who are engaging in something like this. And we can't pretend. And I heard, I saw, I should say, online people say, "Oh, well, we can't be racist." Oh, yes, we can, and some of us are. And what I'm trying to get at is that I believe, my theory, that there's something innate in all of us, right? That before I can do serious harm to you, there's like a little programming in my brain that says, no, if I think of you as an equal, I can't go out and, you know, bash your brains in, because that's equal to bashing my brains in. And I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. So the first step that has to happen, and this has been happening since the beginning of time and since we've had war, is I've got to find a way to make you other. I can't make you like myself, because if I think you're just like me, I'm not going to want to harm you. And if I need to, for whatever reason, because of lack of resources or whatever, I need something that you have. And I've got to convince all these people that, hey, we've got to go and get this something. Well, the first thing I got to do is convince that the people that have the something don't deserve that something, that somehow it was ill-gotten gain, or they're somehow less than other. I've got to
Right.
demonize the opponent. That is very critical. Um, and what I'm saying to everyone is, we have to look at all the incidents in our society. This is why I don't tell ethnic jokes, because that's how it starts. It's that desensitization
Right.
of someone else as an other. I don't tell stories that focus on it, because it's not necessary. And especially when you look at um the genocide that happened in Rwanda. you know that's a textbook of how you get one part of society to turn against another part of society, and that's how it happened. And that's why we're talking about it on this podcast, because the media had a role to play in that, in casting the one side as cockroaches, which was the kind, and that's how it started. And I'm saying that none of us here are immune to that problem. And that's why we've got to start thinking bigger. I would hope we as human beings would get to the point where we realize, we can't keep falling for this. That in order for someone who wants something to get other people to go along with them en masse, there's usually this demonization effort that has to be involved. And that's the seeds of racism. You know, human beings committed the unpardonable sin of enslaving other human beings.
Right.
In order for us to make that palatable, to that we could commit such a horrible crime and get millions of people to be absolutely okay with it, the lie had to be introduced. Oh, well, it's okay that we're enslaving these folks because, they're subhuman, they're not that smart, they're
Right.
whatever. That's how it begins.
Right.
And none of us, that's my point. Particularly this year has been, this past 2 years really has been such an illuminating year for many people because they've been home and they've had time to focus on this. So now, let me pivot a little bit, and because again, that's the benefit of having this panel is we get diverse perspectives. And Harv, what are your thoughts on all this?
I'm glad you picked on me because as you were talking, I was looking at our panel here, and it occurred to me that, we have some representation. And as you all were talking, Randy was saying, Asian, Chinese, Jeanette, you were saying black, Greg, you were saying black. And it just occurred to me that, I think part of the problem is, as you pointed out, Greg, it's one part of society gets to go against and sort of encourages the bad actions against another race or part of society. And as you were all talking, I was thinking, geez, I've been around the world a bit, and I've seen racism in multiple forms. And the thing that always struck me was we're all part of the human race. There's only 5 genetic pools in the whole world that all started in Africa. So we're all out of Africa, right? I mean, historically, the genetic pools all started there. But as you were all talking, I was thinking, okay, so what is it that makes you black? What is it that makes you Asian? What is it that makes you Latina, Latinx? I mean, if you go through the process and interracial marriage, I'll bring it up. I'll just put it out there. At what point do those interracial kids lose their identity? Are they black? Are they Latin? Are they Chinese? Are they white? And what is it about society that reinforces that we're not all humans, that we're all not just the human race? You know, and I've often said this as a joke. I think that, but as I thought about it, what started out as a joke is probably more true than I realized. And it was, I don't think we'd come together as a human race until we had a threat outside the human race. Because then we would be able to say, oh, there's the bad guy. There's the people who are trying to oppress us. So, I'm thinking that, I've been hearing everything about how you're treated as a part of your race, and it's one group of.
I ask all of you to bear with me for 1 second. Um, I'm not a person that believes in heroes, and I don't do a whole lot of hero worship. But one human being that I did hold in high regard was for John Lewis. And what made him such an iconic figure to me was not the work that he did for civil rights in regards specifically to African Americans. You would expect someone who is of the group that they are fighting for to fight hard for that. He did that. But in 1997, he stood on the floor of the House and gave an impassioned speech as to why Democrats should support gay rights. Now, this was at a time when gay rights were not popular. And he knew that, a lot of his constituents had deeply held religious beliefs that, that view would be problematic. But he stood up for that because it doesn't, a lot of times our view of history or our view of our perception of justice depends upon whose ox is being gored. So we haven't been looking at what's been happening, but if you go back, like the New Yorker published an article on March 25th about the history of violence against Asian Americans in this country. I suggest people go read that. I suggest PBS has a series of I either it has aired or it will air called Asian Americans. I suggest you go see that. This is not something new. This is not something that's been happening just for a year. The article in the New Yorker talks about the murder of Vincent Chin. This happened back in the 80s.
I did a term paper on that actually.
Yes.
So
So violence against this is not something that just we have. This has been a persistent problem, and the first thing we have to accept that that it has been a problem for all of us. Again, going back to that's what I said earlier. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And we can't start this, crabs in the barrel thing, like, well, how dare you jump in front of the line for me? And I hope, Randy, you don't mind if I pick on you. But tell me, your thoughts on that.
well, first off, it actually goes further back than that. It actually goes back as far as 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act, where being Chinese, you weren't allowed to be a Chinese American. For me, I had that uncomfortable situation